see you later in the hearing. Ranking Member Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to personally thank Director Haynes and Director Burns for your bipartisan work, the way you have done outreach, the way you have assured everyone of this committee of your absolute commitment to the national security of this nation. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your expertise at a time when the world is once again seeing war in Europe. As I indicated in my opening statement, my questions are going to relate to the nuclear threat and the worldwide threat. Director Haynes, you mentioned the nuclear threat in your opening statement. So my question first to Director Haynes, Burns, and General Berrier relates to Vladimir Putin and his statements themselves. He has stated that if anyone entered the conflict, that he would escalate, including nuclear attacks as part of his exercises prior to entering into Ukraine. He included a nuclear weapons component. He's been very boisterous about his modernization of his nuclear weapons and the new capabilities that they're seeking, including the hypersonics, the Vanguard, which they now have deployed. So my first question to the three of you is, do you believe him? Do you believe that if the United States or its NATO allies entered this conflict to protect the innocents that Vladimir Putin is killing in this unprovoked act, that it could escalate and that he would be willing to escalate this conflict to a nuclear conflict? Director Haynes, Burns, and General Berrier.
Thank you, Ranking Member Turner, and thank you for the way you've worked with us as well, by the way. I'd say we can obviously go into this in further detail in closed session, but as a general matter, you know, as I indicated, his public statement about the special alert status, which, by the way, is not a technical term as we understand it within their system, it doesn't relate to a specific alert status within their system, was very unusual, and we obviously take it very seriously when he's signaling in this way. But we do think, as I indicated, assess that he is effectively signaling, that he's attempting to deter, and that he has done that in other ways. For example, having the strategic nuclear forces exercise that we indicated had been postponed until February begin then as a method of effectively deterring, using his nuclear forces as a way to say this could escalate and therefore NATO should not get involved, and that's been his main purpose in doing so. And, you know, again, as indicated, we're watching very closely for movements, anything related to his strategic nuclear forces, and we're not seeing something at this stage that indicates that he is doing something different than what we've seen in the past. And I think that's probably as much as I could say, and I'll leave it to others.
No, the only thing I'd add, Congressman, is that, you know, in response to your direct question about a scenario in which NATO and the United States were directly involved in military conflict with Russia, you know, Russian doctrine holds that, you know, you escalate to de-escalate. And so I think the risk would rise, according to that doctrine, of in extremis, you know, the Russian leadership considering the use of tactical nuclear weapons. But I stress that that's only in that specific circumstance that you described of a direct military conflict between NATO and Russia.
Just a couple of thoughts, Ranking Member. Putin has invested very wisely in these niche weapons, and you mentioned some of them in your opening statement. I believe that he thinks that gives him an asymmetric advantage, and he's also invested in tactical nuclear weapons. I also believe that when he says something, we should listen very, very carefully and maybe take him at his word. So this question is the one that analysts are pondering right now, and I think we really need to do some more work on it. I'm happy to digest this more in the closed session.
Great. Well, I appreciate, General Berrier, your statement, because that actually goes to my next question. Because of the modernization that has occurred by Vladimir Putin in the nuclear infrastructure of Russia, I believe, as you have stated, that it has emboldened him, meaning that he believes he's buying himself an edge. The United States is currently undertaking our nuclear posture review, where we're going to look at our modernization programs, our policies, including we're doing a missile defense review, which obviously is important whenever you're considering someone else's escalatory nuclear threat. So I'm going to ask each of the three of you, are you directly involved in the nuclear posture review, and what would your advice be, knowing that we now have authoritarian regimes that are making open statements about threatening their neighbors, the use of nuclear weapons, and Vladimir Putin changing, his posture, and China significantly investing in both their ICBM fields and in their hypersonics. What should we be doing with our nuclear posture review so that we can deter these authoritarian regimes in the future? Director Haynes, Burns, and General Barrier.
Thank you. So my staff and ODNI is involved in the nuclear posture review, as am I in the context of principals meetings on these discussions. Our role, however, is not a policy role. So I don't provide and did not provide my advice as to whether or not to take a particular posture in the review. What we do is provide essentially the intelligence community's assessments on issues that we're asked about in the context of that review.
Before we go to Director Burns, would it be correct to characterize that likely your assessment is that the threat is increasing?
That the threat is increasing generally, yes, I think that's fair.
Director Burns?
No, all I would add is I absolutely agree that the threat is